I would like to call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Garden City Planning Commission. It's Thursday, August 12th, 2021 at 6:30. Would everyone rise, please, to say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. Would the secretary take the roll call, please?
Chairperson May.
Here.
Commissioner Steenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Turnbull.
Here.
Commissioner Walls.
Here.
Commissioner Kalidas. Commissioner Mativier.
Commissioner Kalidas is absent and excused.
And Commissioner King.
Here.
Okay, before we go on, I would like to welcome our newest member, Mr. King. Welcome to the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
And we need approval of the agenda from the last meeting. Someone would like to make a motion?
Make a motion
Or
to
approval, this approval of the agenda for this meeting.
Yeah. Make a motion to approve the agenda in front of us for August 12th, 2021.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any comments or discussion? Take the roll, please.
Commissioner Steenberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull.
Aye.
Commissioner King.
Aye.
Commissioner Walls.
Aye.
Chairperson May.
Aye. Next item is approval of minutes from the regular meeting of May 13th, 2021.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of May 13th, 2021.
Motion's made and seconded. Any comments or corrections? Hearing none, take the roll, please.
Commissioner Steenberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull.
Aye.
Commissioner King.
Aye.
Commissioner Walls.
Aye.
Chairperson May.
Aye. Next item is public comment on non-agenda items only. If there's someone here who would like to comment on an item not on the agenda tonight, please stand and be recognized. Seeing none, we'll move on. First item of business, PPL 21-0023, request for site plan approval to establish a medical marijuana primary caregiver growing operation at 32537 Park Lane Street in the M1 Light Industrial District. If we could start with the consultant's report, please.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chairman. We're here tonight to discuss the proposed use just introduced. This is a proposal for for the applicant to operate a medical marijuana primary caregiver grow operation. So the site itself is a 25,600 square foot lot. It has a one-story, 11,000 square foot building, and then there's an open area to the rear of the site behind the building. And the applicant is proposing to take the building and split it into 7 separate units. Each of these units would vary in size from about 1,244 square foot to about 1,525 square foot. So basically about equal units. And when it comes to the primary caregivers growing medical marijuana for themselves and their patients, it is now listed as a permitted use in the M1 district per the most recently adopted medical marijuana ordinance.
Before we go on, could you tell me how that's differentiated from the other grow operations where we're only allowed to have 3?
Yes. So these are caregivers operating under the first medical marijuana statute, the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act that was adopted in 2008. People can register themselves as a caregiver, and then they can care for up to 5 patients. And then as a caregiver, they can grow 12 plants for each of those patients, plus an additional 12 for themselves. So each caregiver can grow 72 plants in total, provided they have a registered patient listed as for them as a primary caregiver. That's the first act. This was the one originally adopted in 2008, and then since that time, there was the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act, MMFLA, and that was for commercial medical marijuana facilities. And under that statute, the city adopted an ordinance to allow for 3 total facilities. And as you know, we stack them. They can be a grower, a processor, and then a provisioning center. So those are the 3 commercial. So those are commercial operations that will grow medical marijuana commercially. They will process it commercially, and then they will have it for sale on their site in a provisioning center commercially. These are caregivers that are operating under that first Michigan Medical Marijuana Act.
I believe that we have an ordinance against selling marijuana to the public. Do we not?
We sell
It sounds like all this is doing is trying to skirt our ordinance that prohibits that.
Well, what it is that actually we adopted the ordinance to make sure that caregivers are only operating in the industrial district. Prior to this, prior to actually the Michigan Supreme Court ruling in April of 2019, caregivers were actually allowed to operate. It wasn't defined where they're allowed to operate. And case law at that time said that municipalities couldn't even regulate where they go. So normally, as part of the Zoning Enabling Act and part of the power of municipality, we could regulate where a particular use would go. But at that time, we weren't allowed to even say where the caregivers would grow. So the caregivers were growing their marijuana, 72 plants or more, in homes, in the neighborhoods. They were doing that, and there are instances in which they're still trying to do that. So what we did is once the Supreme Court said no, municipalities can regulate where these type of actions can go, we adopted an ordinance that, and we adopted the zoning ordinance, and we adopted the licensing ordinance, so that caregivers, because you have to allow them to grow the medicine, but we get to say, the municipality gets to say where they can and cannot grow. And we are saying they can only grow in the industrial district because they're this caregiver that's growing. They're only supposed to grow for these patients. So in theory, they're only growing for the 5 patients that they care for. So
getting back to my question, my question was, don't we have an ordinance against the selling of marijuana from the place it's growing?
Only recreational marijuana.
Well, and actually,
It states that it can't be sold within so many feet of Ford Road.
right.
Right.
The commercial medical
We
marijuana
have
facilities have
setbacks.
setbacks.
We have setbacks.
Like, so those 3 commercial facilities that we have adopted, they've met all the setback requirements, including a setback from Ford Road, in addition to the other setbacks. And growers themselves, a grower alone cannot commercially sell marijuana to anyone. Processors,
Isn't that what you just said?
no, because these are caregivers. They're growing marijuana.
Charge for their product.
I mean,
no one grows for free,
Right, yeah.
hands it out for free, they gotta pay rent to the building, so it's a safe assumption that they'll be charging for the marijuana that they're growing, isn't that correct?
most likely. I mean, I don't know what their relationship is with, but they're only authorized to provide that marijuana to the patient. And as part of the licensing and the ordinances of the city that we adopted, each caregiver that's going to be operating in these units has to provide their license and their registration for themselves, and then the registration card for each patient. So we will know and keep on file the active patients that they're providing the medicine to, and they probably are selling it to those patients. But those caregivers are only allowed to give marijuana to those 5 individuals.
And they're licensed by who?
The state of Michigan. So it's one of those instances in which the state law that was actually voted on and then passed and then enacted in 2000, like I said, I believe it was in 2008. It's been, ever since they adopted that for us and from as a zoning standpoint, we've been, trying to find our way in terms of doing what we normally do, which is say where places where an activity can and cannot be located within the community. Now we have this ordinance which does say that because we can't zone it out of the community, what we have done though is in addition to the industrial, saying caregivers can grow in the industrial, we do have ordinances now and the licensing that says caregivers cannot grow in the residential. So the building department and the police department have been actively going, finding when we have enough information, finding instances where caregivers are growing in homes and removing them from the residential neighborhoods. Because that's they cause a lot of issues in residential neighborhoods. We've seen transformers burn and melt. We've seen power lines sagging to the point where they cause brownouts in a block or two from these caregivers when they were growing in residential homes. So the city has been actively attempting to remove them from the single-family neighborhoods because they're negatively impacting the homes. So, but in tandem with that, removing them from residential, we've said you are allowed to operate only in the industrial.
Yeah, I was here for that meeting.
Yeah.
I voted on that, but I also voted that we would not have a retail presence at the growing facilities.
Right.
And that's also an ordinance in Garden City.
I don't believe so. Don't we have a provisioning center allowed?
Right, for commercial medical marijuana.
But not for growing and selling out of the city.
Yes, that's in the same
Well,
building.
no, because we've stacked it that way. For commercial medical marijuana facilities, they can only be a provisioning center if they have a grower and a processor on the same site. So we've siloed them into one facility, and those are the facilities that will be shortly getting their permits to begin construction. They'll have a grow portion of the facility, they'll have a processing portion of the facility, and then have a provisioning center for medical marijuana. So only people that have a medical card will be able to go into these facilities. So there are no recreational.
We're talking about people coming in and purchasing marijuana from a grow facility and in the industrial complex of Garden City, in our M1 district.
Right, and they would be allowed to do that as long as they have a medical marijuana card from a provisioning center.
May I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
Will the patients actually be visiting the facility? Because that's what you're
That's what it
implying,
sounds
and
like.
that's not my
It sounds like
understanding.
there'll be foot traffic in off the street to pick up this thing that are being grown by, it sounds like, a multitude of different people. So who's going to be in charge of keeping track of all that?
The case law and the statute does say that the patient is allowed to have access to the site. Whether they actually come and visit their plants or not, I don't know. But and it's all up to the relationship between the caregiver and the patient, whether they actually come visit the site or not. That's something that is kind of unclear. The way the statute reads, the marijuana has to be located in a locked, secured facility, but then it says accessible by the caregiver or the patient. So.
Well, perhaps it's out of the purview of the commission. I know I'm the new guy here, but shouldn't we understand the distribution process? Because I think that's where you're going.
Well, one of the ways I'm going, but it says here that the intention is to set it up to break into different buildings, where we were talking about how many sites?
Yeah, seven units
sites.
within the
There are
building.
only 7 sites that have to give access to a number of people per site.
Right?
And this is going to be regulated by what, a doorman?
No, I mean, there would
it's
be
probably
no.
not. So there'll be foot traffic coming in off the street
Yeah.
to visit these places with no one really in charge, because it's all different facilities inside of one door.
Yep. And if you recall, when we were adopting this ordinance for the caregivers, that was one of the questions I was posing, whether they should only allow one caregiver per lot, or whether we just allow a facility within a lot, and we chose not to limit the amount of caregivers on a lot. We chose not to limit the amount of caregivers located adjacent to each other. So when we were drafting this ordinance, the ordinance didn't have any kind of restriction on the number of units that could be located within a particular lot.
One thing about this particular plan, as I see, is that each individual unit has a separate outside entrance. They're not all joined, so they could have separate security in that respect. But there's very little to show for any kind of security plan either. That's one of the shortcomings I can see with the site plan. But maybe, okay, well, you've told me what you think about separating it from the commercial growers as far as the restriction of 3. Do you believe our ordinance properly separates it with the language that we currently have to say that these aren't subject to that same 3-unit restriction?
We didn't, as I mentioned, when we were discussing the draft ordinance for the caregivers, we really didn't get into, we did talk about, and I offered the opportunity to limit the quantity or limit the locations or the method of how many could be located within the industrial, and we chose, and the council chose not to limit the quantities.
Yeah, I know they did that, but is that defined sufficiently in what we do have to say that this type of grower, this caregiver, is not subject to the same restriction as the commercial units as far as only allowing 3?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, because the ordinance specifically says we're limiting the commercial facilities to 3 commercial facilities. The primary caregivers are separate and different than the commercial because they operate under a different statute. The commercial facilities are under MMFLA, one statute, and these are operating under MMMA, the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act.
Okay. Well,
So, yeah, the ordinance we have
on
on...
with your presentation then?
Yeah, so the ordinance that we adopted right now at this time didn't limit that size and that quantity and that sort of thing. And so it's just, this is the ordinance right now that we have on the books. And that ordinance, to continue, right now, we did have 5 specific requirements for primary caregivers with regards to their operation. The first being that their location and their setback requirements, they have to be located in the M1 facility zoning district. They have to be 300 feet from any residentially zoned property, and they have to be 500 feet from any child care center, school, park, public park, and all other types of commercial intermediate education facilities. And this particular lot does meet all our setback and location requirements. We have a specific requirement for wastewater from these facilities. These facilities have to be designed and operated so as to minimize the amount of pesticides, fertilizers, and nutrients and marijuana that would discharge into the public wastewater system. The applicant is proposing a 400-gallon sand and sedimentation interceptor to deal with the wastewater. I've already had discussions with the city engineer, and he doesn't feel that an engineering firm is the expert to determine if the type of facility, equipment that would be necessary to meet our ordinance standard. So the engineer recommended that an expert in the field be used to review the proposed wastewater treatment. I've also forwarded questions to DPS director to see what he says in terms of what would be necessary to make sure that any kind of filtration system is adequate. I haven't received comments back from
We
him
know
yet.
that sands is not adequate because we have a PFAS problem in one part of the state, and their ground is primarily sand.
Right.
So it
So,
doesn't filter this type of stuff.
Right. So in the end, we would recommend that the proposed wastewater treatment system be reviewed by an expert in the field, and that's something we can research and conduct. So this might be your choice whether you'd like to see that review prior, or if you would like to deal with this as another piece of equipment, for example, like other mechanical equipment, because in our review process, after the site plan is reviewed for the site compliance with zoning, they submit building documents, and those building documents are reviewed by experts, mechanical inspectors, electrical inspectors, plumbing inspectors. So if we want, it's up to you if you want to add wastewater treatment inspectors to that list, or if you'd like to see that during the building phase, or you see that right now during the site plan phase. That'll be a question for the end. And similarly, with regards to odor, these facilities have to be equipped with a specific system that effectively confines the odor to the interior of the building. Right now, the site plan in front of you does not have any detailed plans at all for odor control. So we would recommend that the applicant submit a revised plan that shows the method of odor control.
Can I ask a question on this one?
Absolutely.
As I read through the materials, and I looked online, and it looks as though this building is about 600 feet from the nearest home, and also 600 feet from the soccer field. And just, I don't have experience with growing marijuana, but I understand that the odor is very strong. Do we have any insight on what would be a realistic distance to where the odor would matter to a homeowner?
Well, the way it works is that our standard says the odor has to be confined to the interior of the building. So if any person walking along the sidewalk or the exterior of the building smells it, then therefore it doesn't comply with our ordinance standard. So the system they'll have to use is going to have to be sufficient where you can't even smell it outside the building.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I understand that. I guess the nature of my question is around the fact that there is nothing in the plan that covers this at all. So
Right.
therefore, it's even more concerning because it is only 600 feet away from the nearest
A
home.
bigger concern also would be, since this is 7 individual units, with each unit would need to have its own wastewater and its own waste air control separately, because that way we can't say, well, it's not us, it's him.
Right.
It's not our building, it's his. His unit's the one that's making all the stink.
The building would have to
The people
comply.
living around it are the people that are going to be paying the price for the indecision on who's responsible for
Right.
what.
So the way it would work is, that's why we would need them to submit the system they're proposing. And so whether they choose to have 7 individual systems or whether they choose to have one combined type of system, whatever system they propose, we're going to have an expert look at it to say that it's sufficient. One other piece of information I do have is that from my other experience in other communities, some of these facilities, it actually is the particulates that they say, the applicants say that the particulates are the ones that cause a lot of the odor issues. And so it's a matter of also the method of operation of the filtration, and then the type of filter they use, and then the frequency in which the filters are cleaned. So that'll be an aspect that we'll take a look at when it comes to that, because there's one facility that I know of is a gigantic facility. It's a commercial grow operation with thousands and thousands and thousands of plants in it, and they utilize particulate for a filter system. So with regards to that, once again, whatever they choose to propose, and they're going to have to submit that to us, that system will have to be reviewed, and then the standard will be that should be sufficient so that it can't not be detected outdoors. And then just to get into it a little bit further, if after the installation there's some complaints and then an ordinance officer goes and it can be detected, well, then they're going to have to revise the system and increase it to make sure it complies with the ordinance. The fourth issue, specifically to these type of facilities, is security. And as I mentioned earlier, the state statute states that it has to be kept in an enclosed lock facility that permits access only by a registered primary caregiver or the qualifying patient. If we're concerned about this, because it brings up a good point around the number of patients that are visiting the site, because that would increase the need for parking and then circulation and that sort of thing. So maybe that when we eventually talk to the applicant, we can talk to them, and maybe there could be a restriction on the amount that only the caregivers are the ones that are visiting the site, and that sort of thing. Because that is a very good point. I mean, if you have that's 35 people that in theory could be visiting their plants all at the same time. And so it's an issue with regards to site circulation, impact on adjacent property, parking requirements, and that sort of thing. But with regards to security, that, because our ordinance, and then the way they have it set up, as I mentioned, is there's no interior hallway providing access between the units. And so, in theory, the proposed configuration would be compliant with the state statute by having the exterior doors using commercial grade locks. They're also proposing a video surveillance system. But with regards to security, once again, as a planning commission, you can choose to take a look at what's being proposed and ask for additional items in order to make sure that the security of the facility is appropriate. And then finally, the state and local licensing registration. I kind of touched on it a little already, but the way that this proposal is being, this use is being proposed, the property owner would be creating the 7 units in the building and then leasing them out to the caregivers. So therefore, at that point in time, when a caregiver wants to go into a unit, they will have to come apply for a certificate of occupancy, submit their licensing. Once again, they have to be a licensed primary caregiver with the state, and then they have to provide the registration for the 5 patients in which they're caring for. And only at that point in time, then they would have to, receive a C of O, apply for a business license, and then they'd be able to operate and go through the business license inspections and that sort of thing. So those are the 5 different areas that are specific to primary caregiver grow operations. With regards to our standard site plan issues, the building itself meets all of our dimensional and setback requirements, except for it's currently legally non-conforming with regards to the side yard setback. It's just a little bit too close to the west side, but it's considered an existing legal nonconformity and is allowed to continue and be operated and used. The applicant is proposing to close a majority of the existing window and door openings. They create new openings for these 7 access doors into the units, and then they're proposing to remove the existing canopies, install some green standing seam vertical medical siding around the top and around, around the top of the building elevations, and kind of make it a design theme, I guess, if you will, of the building. So it will definitely improve the look of it, but it's still going to be a typical industrial style building. And they will be cleaning the brick and repairing it as well. When it comes to parking, the standard that we applied was mainly for manufacturing. So with regards to manufacturing and the square footage of the building, they're only required to provide 9 parking spaces. And they provided 14, so that's in terms of a warehouse facility, that's in compliance with that standard. There's an error in my chart right here. They are required to require 1 barrier-free space, and there's not 1 barrier-free space right now in their site plan, so they will have to provide that. So they need to provide a barrier-free parking space as one of those 14. Some other issues.
Question, just a clarification. You're telling me for 7 businesses, 7 separate businesses, in one building, they only need 14 parking places?
If we only apply the industrial configuration for it, because
But this is becoming a retail because it's selling marijuana to the public. That's what its job is. That's what they're setting it up for. So it's more retail than commercial. It certainly is not an industrial business any longer.
Well, they're not, the intent is for them to not be, they're not supposed to be retail. They're not, their intent is to grow the marijuana.
Someone comes to the building, are they gonna sit out on the street and walk up to the door? Because with 14 spots and 7 different businesses, if one person runs each business, there goes 7 of the parking spots right there, isn't that correct?
Right, yes, so that's why but once again, the intent is they're supposed to be in manufacturing and growing the marijuana, so they're not intended to be retail facilities. So while in theory the state law might allow the patients to visit the plants, I would think as a planning commission, you can ask the questions of the applicant, and if the intent is for the patients to visit the plants, and you're right, then it would be more of a retail operation, and that would not be allowed to occur. So to maintain the designation as industrial, only the caregivers should be the ones that are going to the site and conducting their operations, and then they're transporting the marijuana off the site to their customers in another location, not in this location.
That's assumption on your part that that'll happen, so we have to assume that because we don't.
No, it can be a requirement of their approval, because, once again, you can ask the applicants about the retail aspect of it, because it is a good question. It's a good point to bring up. And because, once again, the vision of this was that they're only going to be doing the growing, because the state statute, in theory, allows the patients to visit the plant. I really don't know why they would come to visit the plants.
Well, it sounds a little bit like when we changed the ordinance to allow sales out the front door. It sounds like we weren't fully looking at what was happening, because now this is a perfect example. Suddenly that we had an ordinance that there was going to be no foot traffic, no retail traffic to our growing facilities, and here it is right here, right now. So
Well, I don't
yes,
recall
we
it.
do have to look at what could happen and what might happen. And are we prepared to have foot traffic with 14 parking spots to 7 different growing facilities?
Once again, there was never any ordinance that prohibited retail
Well, there
sales out of
was.
growers.
And I'm not aware that it changed, and I'll have to look that up because I voted on it.
Yeah, at least from my looking back at the ordinances that have been adopted, and then the ordinances that we've been adopted since I've been here, there isn't a restriction on the retail operation from a grow facility. And actually, in actuality, the city chose to only allow retail operations where there is a grow facility, because we chose to stack them. The only way someone can be a provisioning center, which is a retail operation, is if there's already a grow facility on the site in a commercial operation. So that's kind of,
Yeah, I believe our current ordinance allows sales.
and I think that was,
Although they have to have a medical marijuana card,
Right. It's not.
so it's a restricted audience, but they're still allowed sales. It's not to the general public.
and for example, one other way that we deal with that with the commercial facilities is when they applied for their building permits, their site plans, we applied this industrial standard to the grow portion and the processing portion of the buildings, but then their retail provisioning center location, the retail standard of one space for every 150 square foot was applied to the provisioning centers. So because they have called out and they specifically have those locations where the patients with the cards will be visiting the site, because they'll be visiting and buying the marijuana there. So in that instance, they had to provide enough parking for them. But this is a good point, that if, in theory, these 5 patients are going to be visiting their plants, then yes, and then maybe that portion of the building that has that aspect of where the patient is going, it should be retail, and they should provide the parking for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to relook the parking situation there, because it's not an industrial building in that respect.
Right.
There could be a lot more traffic.
Yep.
We need a lot of clarification on that.
Yep. And in addition to that, some of the other things with regards to the parking lot proposed, the current configuration when you have the parking spaces in the site plan along the east elevation and along the east property line and along the rear elevation of the building, if two cars are parked there, the space between them would only be about 11.5 feet, so there's not enough drive aisle space. We require a minimum of 20 feet. So at least one of those should be removed. Another issue with the parking area is that they actually have to provide a loading area. It's not located on the site plan. So they need to provide a compliant 10-foot by 50-foot loading area. My suggestion is that they reconfigure the parking lot so there's parking along the southern property line and parking along behind the building. And then you put the dumpster enclosure in the southeast corner. So that way, when a dump truck is driving up the drive aisle, they go straight into the dumpster. But then also put the loading zone right in front of it. So that way they can have a loading zone for their trucks, because for putting equipment and getting things off the site. And then in theory, they should be able to fit about 14 parking spaces still. For once again, for just the industrial operation. If it's a retail operation, they're gonna need more parking spaces than that.
Just to segue a bit here, if we're gonna have different access doors, are these gonna be exterior access doors? So, on the other part of the law where we have a growing, processing and provisioning, we had a requirement in there under the security part of it that there be a log that's maintained and that the PD have access to that
Well,
as necessary.
Yep.
Is that going to be maintained in each individual spot?
Is that the same as the commercial growing centers?
We did not include that requirement with these caregivers. We left it only in the,
So it only happens in the licensing portion of the individual caregivers, and that they provide proof that they have 5 patients that are eligible for
Right.
their product. Okay.
Yeah, so in our ordinance right now, there is no security log requirement. I'm just gonna pull up the ordinance to see what it specifically says about security. Other issues, when we look at landscaping, a landscape plan wasn't provided. There is an existing paved area that serves as parking in front of the building it's not allowed by the zoning ordinance. They're not allowed to park that close to public street. So they are proposing to remove that. So they'll remove the existing asphalt part of it, put in grass. So the one thing, given the limited amount of green area on the building, the only thing I would recommend is possibly the applicant providing some foundation plantings along the exterior front elevation, and then just indicate with the size and species of and location of all those plantings. Some other items, just with regards finally on the site plan, the site plan shows an easement along that rear property line, but it also shows there's a fence. They propose to put the fence within the easement, so they would just have to confirm that the easement allows the fence to be located within the easement, and if not, then they just have to take the fence out of the easement. I'm not exactly sure who that easement goes to. It might be DTE, or I don't know if it's a city easement.
DTE is the
It
most
goes,
common.
yeah. So if it's a DTE, I believe DTE does allow fencing within their easements, especially if it goes underneath the power lines, but then the applicant takes on the risk that DTE will just remove the fence if they need to get access to the power lines. But they'd have to research the easement to see what rights they have as the property owner. For the proposed dumpster enclosure, we just need the detailed elevations and cross-section for the dumpster to ensure it's built to code. For lighting, there's no lighting proposed on the existing site. The lighting ordinance does have a minimum standard for light levels and intensity and around the property, so we do recommend the site plan being revised to provide the location of any proposed light fixtures and also photometric plan to show the light levels. And then no signage is proposed at this time, so signage would have to be done under a separate permit, comply with standards at that time. There is a sidewalk along the front of the building. It's proposed to remain. And then the last item was with regards to any electrical equipment, because a lot of these facilities lately are requesting on-site generators, and that's probably a good idea, emergency backup generators to maintain the security of a facility, that sort of thing. So we just advise that if any equipment is being proposed on the roof or the exterior, that any method of screening be identified. So with regards to the use, as we've discussed, there is some additional items that need to be provided. And at a minimum, the wastewater treatment system needs to be reviewed by a professional. The one restriction, condition of approval that I was recommending is that specifically stating that only one caregiver can operate within each unit. I think that's important to put in the any site plan approval. If you feel that you feel that they substantially comply with the ordinance, at that point in time, I would recommend any motion that you would grant for any kind of approval, have that condition that only one caregiver be allowed on the site. And then, of course, they do need to provide revised site plans that address the various issues we discussed, providing an odor control system, revising the parking lot, showing a landscape plan, screening of the electrical equipment if necessary, lighting plan, dumpster enclosure, cross-section details, and then the confirming that the fence is allowable to be installed in the easement. Those are the issues that, with regards to this particular.
Yes, Mike?
What about, on the other half of the law, it was required that the police department sign off on the security plans, so far as the camera's ability to operate at nighttime and the scan, and I remember details that the camera for all the ingress and egress points to the building had to have a certain width so that people going and coming could be recorded for security reasons. Is this security gonna have to pass that same scrutiny
We didn't
by the police department?
We didn't include that in as a requirement in the ordinance when we passed the ordinance. The ordinance,
They are required to have security, though.
well, yeah, and the security specifically in the ordinance says marijuana grown by a registered primary caregiver must be kept in an enclosed locked facility as defined under the law that permits access only by the registered primary caregiver or the qualifying patient. So
We're allowing the patients to be there as well as the caregiver.
we do say or, so it doesn't include, it's not necessarily equivalent for both of them to be there. I definitely think as part of a condition of site plan, if you wanted to restrict the site visits to only the caregivers, to me, that's allowable because it's an
Is that
industrial
allowable
use.
with the state law? Because the state law says they should be able to visit their plants.
Right, yeah, so that's,
Which again invites foot traffic and goes back to the fact that it's no longer an industrial business. Now you're looking at a retail business and now you're getting retail foot traffic in there. The security that we set up for the commercial grow with the cameras, closed circuit, not even Wi-Fi, we wanted on-site, recordable for 24 hours security. We wanted full light security, 24 hours. We wanted the full fence security. And I voted on the measure that said no foot traffic. It was a distribution. Now you're talking, what you're talking about here is something totally different. This has got nothing to do with that. This is a skirt of our
Eric, you need to pull your
ordinance.
mic down a little bit so they can hear you.
This is strictly going around our ordinance of commercial. Your first sentence that you just read was a residence. Now, if these people are setting up a business, that's not a residence. And you can't be a residence.
Well, it's
In
a
our
separate
commercial
category for a
difference.
caregiver and a commercial grower,
Right.
though.
But you're blurring that line right now by putting them over there and then allowing a 7-parcel building
Well,
to set up 7 different businesses with 5 caregivers per. So if they all show up at once, there can be as many as 35 people for 14 parking spots. And that
On top of
includes
that, it's a
employees and that
giant
includes
security
maintenance
breach.
people.
What we're talking
yeah,
about
we,
here.
we have no security at all under this.
Under this, there's zero security
Yeah.
because
But let's let,
these gentlemen can operate a business and there's no problem there. The law permits that, and we'll figure out how to make that fit in the boxes here. But they're going to have a contract with 7 individuals. Now, those 7 individuals will have their licensing through the state because they have 5 customers, medical marijuana customers, which could change constantly. They could drop customers, add customers, and there's no way of knowing who's going in and out of that building. So that could operate as the new marijuana store in Garden City, and there'd be no control whatsoever over it. Now, if that's what we want to allow, that we're going to have a new marijuana store in Garden City that anybody from the public can walk up and buy whatever they're selling, then that's what's being laid out here, because there's a gaping hole in that security.
Well, there's a lot of holes in this, but let's
Yeah.
hold off on this.
Okay.
We still have, if you're finished with your
Sure.
presentation, let's hear the presentation from the applicant, if they would like to come to the mic and
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Nick Ritchie. I started as a caregiver. I have a large grow in Warren under the name of Goldkind. And this is an opportunity to get some people out of their basements and not working around the law, just giving them an opportunity to grow in the ordinance. I can address your concerns, and I'd have to consult with my attorney to make sure I'm not violating state law. But we could make it where there's a schedule that has to be controlled. Usually, nobody comes to these except for the grower, the caregiver. But if the patient does want to see it, he'd have to come at a specified time and only so many times per month in order to see his plants, which is never really the case. But again, I'd have to consult with my attorney to make sure that that lease is adequate, so we're not violating any state law. For security, I mean, all of this makes sense if people are coming to, if the caregivers come and show up, it doesn't make sense. But that's not really the way that these operate. You know, the caregiver goes there, grows the product, and delivers it to the patient, you know, once or twice a month. And usually he delivers it to the patient because he's being compensated for his time and effort, so he delivers it to the patient. And I will figure out a way to work around that meets yours and, you know, the board's requirements. And all the other questions that you've had, I can address those to make sure that it's adequate for the team. So that's my number one. What other notes was I taking?
Quick question before you continue. Why would a patient need or want to come see a plant grow?
They don't.
I don't watch my grass grow.
No, exactly. It
I
doesn't.
mean, in my backyard.
But like he stated, I'd have to review, you know, if the law states that the patient can come and view their plant at any time, that would have to be a specific time that works for the caregiver anyways. You know, the caregiver is gonna operate it. You know,
He's
these
gonna
things.
need to let them in and out.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But usually nobody ever comes and visits that. They don't really care for it. Usually they have some condition and they're not too concerned about their plant, they just want their product.
right.
well, I can
Well, I was
understand that.
wondering, real quickly, I was wondering if you could shed some light on why somebody would want to go into a building and see a plant growing. Because they grow pretty slow
They
anyhow.
grow very slow.
And they're mostly green. To go in and look at it,
I guess
can't
maybe once or twice
understand.
just for the fun of it, you know, to see where
I
their
don't
product is.
understand that at all.
Probably a health and safety thing.
But, okay.
You know, and they could look to make sure that the environment's clean and there's no mold or anything growing. But other than that, but it then gets tested, so, you know, the test usually verifies there's no molds or anything in the product.
So, I'm not an attorney, but when I read this, I mean, because this is a language from the statute, it says, the marijuana grown must be kept in an enclosed locked facility as defined under the act that permits access only by a registered primary caregiver or qualifying patient. I don't necessarily think that means inclusive, that both, it doesn't say and,
Says or.
it says or. So one or the other has to have access. And I think the intent is to make sure that no other person that doesn't have the rights to those plants has access. So I would like to think, and once again, I don't know this for sure, but it says or, it doesn't say and. It doesn't
Yeah,
say,
I
it
think that
doesn't.
would solve a lot of problems if we can address it that way and make that a restriction on the site plan approval.
And would,
but we need to check the legality of that first. And, you know, that's gonna take a little effort. If you can shed some light on that in the future, that would be good.
I will make sure
We
to
will
address
try
that
to
tomorrow.
check on that as well. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
From the notes I was taking, the odor control, I thought there was one given to our architect, apparently there wasn't. I know there's some holes in this, and I will make sure all those holes are presented correctly upon the next month. Well, all these holes that it obviously had will be corrected. And better presentation.
do the 7 people that have these units, the growers, do they rotate out, in and out? Can
No.
someone leave and come in, and are they registered with the state? Is that
I'm
how
not
that
sure with the
works?
state, it's gonna be a 1-year lease. We're building this in a convertible manner with the 7 sites. So hopefully upon the next year, if you guys allow another facility, this would be converted to a state licensed facility. So the goal would be to convert this at some point if the city allowed for it.
Okay.
To a licensed grow operation? Is that what you're
Because right
saying?
now you guys only allow 3, but usually the cities, as they see there's no issues, they adopt a few more. And then every year they say, okay, you know, the next 3 come aboard, and since we're
That
already
hasn't
here.
happened yet, but it's possible.
Yeah, exactly, if it doesn't happen, then, you know, it doesn't happen. But if it does, the goal would be to convert this to a state licensed facility,
Okay,
a grow. That way, all we'd have to do is put an interior hallway and then reconfigure the inside slightly, but conform to the use of the Class A license.
well, we would have to deal with that if it happened.
Correct,
Yeah.
of course.
All right, yes.
Hi, my name's Said Arvid, from Arvid Design and Construction.
We have these guys sign in.
Yeah, we need both of you guys to sign in that sheet if you would.
Sure. I wanted to address a couple technical items that was brought in early about primarily odor control. We did have some discussions with the client about the equipment that's going to be engaged in doing so, and we had commissioned our mechanical engineer to start designing 7 separate odor control units for each one. And it does involve approved equipment that have carbon-based odor absorbent, if I'm not,
Activated chart.
right, as well as the proper venting and cycling of air and fresh air intakes and so on and so forth. And these will be definitely detailed to specifications for the engineer and the inspector to review. But we can say that it is a condition, odor control shall be mandatory to pass inspection and approval with the engineers that are going to review this. This is one.
The odor protection that we put in place too, and the way that we designed the rooms, there's gonna be, you know, a couple chambers, so the odor has to escape those chambers before it goes out the front door.
True.
But, I mean, if somebody walks by and smells it, we're in violation, so we're gonna make sure that we're never in violation.
Are
Absolutely.
you going to be depending on the individual caregiver to maintain the
Absolutely.
filtration system?
Absolutely. They have to have contracts, and I think they engage their lawyer to look forward, once they get these facilities approved, to engage these caregivers in a proper contract to maintain and abide by laws, Michigan laws and state laws, and security laws, law enforcement laws, and any derivative thereof. For the time being, we were hoping to get this process going so we can work together and try to nail down all these parts that we talked about.
Okay.
Definitely, if a photometric plan, landscaping, dumpster sections, we're aware of this. We can accommodate any necessary details that you look forward to seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anything else?
No, any questions from you?
Yeah, we may have to hire more ordinance officers in this city. By breaking this up, we have 7 different people responsible. I don't want that.
Right,
at all.
our ordinance guy walks in.
It's one building, I want one person, one corporation to be responsible for odor. I want you to be responsible for security. I want you to be responsible for wastewater. If I have to go in and verify that this is operating correctly, or if the worst should happen and there are citizens complaining and somebody has to go in, they're gonna have to chase down the owner of the building. They're gonna have to chase down 7 different individuals. No. One building should not have 8 different masters. One building should have one master. 7 different tenants, but if you go to an apartment building, you have one master. You may have 40 units in it, but you don't go to all 40 people when there's a plumbing problem, or a landscaping, or a leak in the roof, or a leak in the basement, or any other possible problems.
Yep.
There has to be one master, it's one building. I am totally not interested in dividing this responsibility up to a whole host of people. It just creates a nightmare for everything, for enforcement, for ordinances, for security.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, we can work that in.
Hello, my name is Ali. How you guys doing? My partner Nick, he built out a 65,000 square foot. I'm not trying to sit here and brag about it. That's why when I purchased the property, I had to basically beg him to get on board. He's like, "Come on, let's go." And the reason we thought this was a good idea is so much people are growing. They're doing one in Dearborn right now in these neighborhoods, and I guess the cities want to crack down on the caregiver, but the state is allowing it, so
Sure.
designating certain areas. But it's going to be so crucial on the setup. So with his expertise on the setup with the odor and all that, I don't think it's going to be a problem at all now. Whatever.
But yeah, we can,
We'll
we can
prove it.
organize it. where
In
there's-
principle, I think it's a great
I
idea.
agree with you.
And it could solve a current problem. But again, one building, one master. Odor, security, wastewater.
Yeah.
You
See,
know,
all of those
so-
systems are gonna require a certain amount of maintenance. And
Absolutely.
if you depend on 7 different people to maintain all these systems, a lot of stuff's gonna fall through the cracks.
Here's the first, for instance, that you guys and us as a city will run into. The fire department. They want to make sure everything's good. It's a new building, new operation. They want to make sure you're safe and the people that are in the building are safe. So they're going to do an inspection. How do they inspect a building that has 8 masters? Do they need to come back 8 times and schedule 8 separate visits for one building? I would say no to that immediately. I would say no.
Well, I mean,
Again, back to the idea, it's one building, one master. We want to come, if there's an issue or an award to be given, we want to come talk to you. We don't want to chase down 7 different people that are in 7 different places with 7 different schedules. Not a good idea. To start with that as a working premise, bad idea right from the get.
The only way to get the return on investment was to get several units, or we'd love to have it, unless it's a state grow, but you guys got a cap, like where you built a facility in Warren, there's no cap, there's only caps on the retail.
But I mean, we could work that as long as there's one master, then we sublease it. I mean, you know, if that verbiage works better, that's not a problem.
Yeah, I think as long as there's one person responsible for maintaining the systems, then that,
Like a management company
Yeah,
of some sort.
excuse me, I think I.
Here's,
I get-
for instance, we have an odor problem.
Yeah, you wanna call one person.
It's him.
Yes,
No, it's not me.
I
It's
get
him.
I have,
No, we don't want to be in that situation. We don't want to have to play traffic cop with 8 different people.
I understand exactly where you're coming from. Like you said, in an apartment
Right.
building, excuse me, the landlord is responsible for any issues that could be mechanical, electrical, and so
All
on.
issues,
All issues.
all issues.
Okay. And I believe that is something that could be implemented, implemented in the same token, in the same manner.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who owns the building?
Well, it's both of us. It's gonna be, I purchased it, but he'll be on there soon.
okay,
As
sir,
of right now, it's just me, but he's gonna be 50%.
Gotcha.
okay, did you sign in on our sheet, please?
Sure.
Okay, did you have anything else you wanted to add to your presentation?
No, I mean, it's all gonna be fixed.
Okay, after you're done with your presentation, we need to have a little discussion and we'll decide where we want to go from here. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Okay, well, there's several questions that need clearing up with this. I really think, we can't act to approve a site plan at this point. There's one thing that wasn't addressed. I think the fire marshal should be asked to make sure that the complex complies with all the life safety standards because of the way we have long, narrow buildings with only one exit. And I want to make sure that that's considered a safe environment for the caregiver or the patient, whoever happens to be in there. I think we need to have that plan for the odor control system in place so it can be inspected by our experts. There's several other items on your site plan review that need to be addressed. I think all of these things need to be addressed before we consider acting on it. And of course, one of the big things is whether or not we can allow more than one person to have access to the building. If we can go with either or, that's one thing, but if we have to allow, since along with a caregiver, access to each building, that presents a huge security issue.
Right. And more just with dealing with the parking and the,
And the parking,
and
yes.
site circulation.
There's not enough parking if we're gonna have that big of a crowd there. I don't see why we would have a big crowd there. I think one person per unit to take care of it would probably be all we need, but that's not what we're looking at approving here. So,
That's making an assumption also, Fred. You're assuming that there's gonna be one person in each.
well, that would be,
We can't make assumptions.
That can be put
We
inside.
have to look at.
No,
what
we don't
would
wanna-
happen if 5 people per caregiver show up at once. And
well, that's why
7
we
units.
have to have
And that-
stipulations in our approval.
Right.
That's why we need to know.
Potentially 5 patients, 7 care, we have 35 there. We have 2 owners right there. Now we're up to 37 people. The only way this is gonna pass muster for myself is if the police department signs off on the security, whatever that may be.
That's another thing that,
And,
it should be presented to the police chief to have him sign off on security.
and I also know that within the last approximately 18 months, we've had 3 transformers burn or explode in Garden City. That's in the last 18 months, 3.
Yeah, it's obviously not a good situation having
Well,
people
the
do this in
buildings-
their homes.
Correct. So as I say, this is a very good idea in principle to correct an existing problem. And so I applaud you for creating a solution here. We just gotta figure out how
To kind
to
of work
put
out
all
the-
the puzzle pieces
Work out the
together.
fine points here, so,
Because you can see that 7 grow operations, 2 owners, and 5 patients apiece, we're talking about almost 40 people that have potential access in and out of the building. And then when you add into that the variability of, if I'm one of those people that are renting space from you, I could change patients weekly. So now we've taken that almost 40 number and expanded it out to who knows what. So we have no more security.
yeah, so you
We
give
might as
everybody a
well put
key?
a sign, marijuana for sale, and make sure you have a parking attendant to direct all the traffic, because I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of it.
I know when it comes to the law, we gotta go by the law, but there will be no patients coming to the building. It's just.
Well, that's what we have to find out.
Well, that's
But
one of the
that's
things we
not
have to
something
do.
that's in writing, and that's not a guarantee.
We have to have one person responsible for that building, for odor and water, and I'm pretty sure the building can handle it because it's in an industrial park. And I think all those buildings are wired for a minimum of 220.
The reason why we bought that was because they had 7 power.
Plenty of power?
Yeah.
What do they have? Do they have 440?
440, they have three
Three-phase?
220 kVA transformers.
Yeah,
Okay, so more than likely, you're covered there, we won't be battling any fires over there. My son battled one in his backyard just a few months ago. The transformer overheated and blew up. It took down 16 blocks worth of power in doing so. But we have to have one person to talk to, a central point of communication for awards, for sewage, for trash pickup, for anything that happens on that property. We cannot be talking to 8 different people, because not only do you end up with the problem of he should, they did it, you end up with the problem of communication. It's hard to, it would be like a football team with 8 coaches all on the offensive side. Nobody knows what's going on, nor would they ever know what's going on. And that would include the fire department and the police department and anybody else that would have some concerns or whatnot there.
okay, well, I think we need, if
And
anyone else has a comment they want to make.
This does nothing. The Sandon Interceptor, it has no chemical requirements on here as to what it does and how good it does it.
We need a system that can be approved by our expert inspector.
Now, with the other laws, I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel here, because I think a lot of this, and you may already know this far better than I, but there may already be specifications of corporations out there that are already making odor control units and water filtration units that can filter the various pesticides and herbicides and whatnot that may or may not be used in this type of an operation. And so that may already be out there. But if it's not on here, we don't know and we can't approve. So those are the type of things that we're gonna need moving forward, so we can take a look at this in earnest and check off all the boxes so that you can proceed and get
Okay.
this business.
I think we need a motion to table until they can come back with more details for us, more complete plans, and address all of the things we've talked about tonight. Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to table and have you guys get with Mario. We've talked about a lot of stuff tonight, and I've scribbled some notes. Mario's been writing a lot more than me. that's your go-to guy, and get this where it's all on one sheet of paper, where we have one thing to look at, instead of all our scribbled notes. And then we can move forward and have a good discussion and get something done on this.
Is there a support for the motion?
Support.
Support, motion made, supported. Take the roll, please.
Commissioner Steenberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull,
Aye.
Commissioner King, Commissioner Walls,
Aye.
Chairperson May.
Aye. Thank you very much. When you bring that information back to us, then we'll bring it to the table
Thanks,
again.
guys. Mario's good. He'll help you out. He's real good.
Okay. Other business, zoning ordinance amendments, discussion of draft zoning amendments relating to the O1 district, mixed-use district, smoking use standards, and licensed massage therapy. Mario, do you want to start us off?
So as you know, we've gone through the ordinances and we've addressed some of our pressing topics, and so tonight we're continuing on that list. We did talk about trying to prioritize what ordinance issues you guys would like to talk about, so this is where some of these came from in terms of priority. And the first one being something from the master plan, which was the idea of eliminating the O1 district, which only allows office-type uses, and also simultaneously the creation of a mixed-use district. So the amendments before you, the first amendment deals with the first issue, elimination of the O1 district in the ordinance. So a lot of these amendments are looking at and going through and eliminating that reference to O1 in other parts of the zoning ordinance. So that's why the first thing before you references the senior centers and housing standards, because the senior center housing facilities were allowed in the O1. We're just saying get rid of that designation in there. Going through the ordinance and getting to on page 2 is where it gets to the point where we propose deleting the O1 district language. So just deleting that completely out of the ordinance. And then that's what's on page 3 as well, just getting rid of that O1 district. But then one thing I noticed is that under the special land use approval within the O1, most of those uses are also listed in the C1 district, because that's one of the concepts of eliminating this O1, is that C1 allows everything that the O1 allows, except for the only one that I found that wasn't listed in C1 that's in O1 are veterinary clinics. So that's why if you go to page 5, that's the paragraph B right there at the top of the page is the special land use is allowed in the C1 district. So if the intent is to say everything that we currently allow in O1, we're going to allow in C1 as a special use approval, we would have to add veterinary clinics as a special use in the C1.
Okay, so everything else from O1 is included in C1 then?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, so that's the only thing you had to add?
Yes. And then there's some cleanup issues, like, for example, subparagraph 3 above that, where funeral homes and mortuaries, I just added the reference subject to provisions of section, every now and then I'm cleaning up some of the references to make sure that, when it comes to funerals and mortuaries, it references the right specialty use sections.
Getting rid of redundancy.
Yeah, getting rid of redundancies, but also making sure we reference the right locations.
Yeah, that's smart.
And then moving forward, on page 5, it also would eliminate some of the specific language that office uses under project design standards for the planned unit developments. So our section 332 is in our planned development section, and it talks about office uses. And so this just cleans up paragraphs 3, 4, 5, and 6 at the bottom, because it references a section for the O1 district that we've eliminated. So I'm trying to go through and clean up those things so we don't have any dangling references to sections that aren't going to exist in the ordinance. So that's what that does. It eliminates the reference to a section that will no longer exist, renumbers the paragraphs, and then just makes sure to be inclusive to say that office, personal service, and retail commercial uses shall comply with the C2 standards. So it's just, once again, cleaning up some of the existing language. And then finally, on page 6, I have to clean up the schedule of regulations, eliminating the O1 district, and eliminating the footnote O, which was specifically for O1. So it's a lot of, it's the first phase of it, which just eliminating that O1 district. So that's what all those little tiny edits do, amendments do.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Should we take these amendments one at a time?
Yep.
And so do we have any questions about elimination of the O1 and the changes that have been made? Any comments?
One thing, on our appendix A, what's MU?
So yeah, that's the one thing that's a little, I kind of got ahead of myself there when I started doing that. I started adding in the mixed-use reference without getting to the Amendment 2 yet, because if not, I would have had to repeat
Yeah.
the same amendments
Maybe-
again in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe because you've done that, we should, you know, after, if we decide to
Yeah.
go ahead with it, we kind of sideboard it and make sure that mixed use is straightened away before we
Correct, because
prove this, because it's got so many references.
yeah, because the intent of the ordinance, of the master plan isn't necessarily that they're both at the same time. So the first thing being just eliminating O1. If you choose to do is just get rid of the O1 in terms of simplicity, because it's the same as a C1, then I would just tweak this a little bit more to get rid of that MU reference. So the
Okay.
first idea is just to be a little bit more concise with the ordinance, be more lean, as they call it in the vernacular, and just eliminate the O1 completely, because it's basically C1 districts. And just for your information, the other thing that we'll have to do if we move forward with this idea is then we'll have to just make sure that everything that's currently zoned as O1 gets a new zoning designation of C1, and making sure that that's right. So as long as you're okay with the idea of eliminating the O1, then the next time I'll present you a draft zoning map that will show the revised zoning designations for what's now currently
Yeah.
zoned O1 and what their new zoning designation will be.
Yeah, we've run into a lot of problems with O1 because it was so restrictive and people weren't able to develop their property the way they wanted.
Yep.
And so I think this will go a long ways to helping that situation.
Easter Road over on Merriman,
Yep.
by Warren there,
Yeah.
and the field still sits empty.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, any comments about O1? Eric?
No,
No?
good.
Right?
No.
No?
I think we should get rid of it.
Okay, well, I think everybody's pretty much in agreement about O1. Before we vote on it though, let's just put it aside so we can decide about whether or not to include the mixed use in
Right.
all of this.
And I would just recommend too, if you'd like to, since we've lived with O1 for a while, we don't necessarily have to do it piecemeal. I kind of like the idea of sending a bundled package of amendments to the city council, so they deal with a lot of things at once, instead of having to have multiple public hearings here and multiple meetings at the city council. So maybe if we can get a few of these together, if you're okay with that. Because I think the council has been receptive to that, what we've been doing in the past regarding the bundling these amendments.
I don't see a problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah, the mayor's actually bragged about it a couple of times recently that, you know, we've been cleaning this stuff up. Although it didn't sound like we had anything to do with it. It sounded like it was all,
Well, that's the way it goes.
That's right. So, once again, they're not necessarily tied to each other, it's just the next concept in line with the elimination of the O1 is the idea of creating a mixed-use district. So, and it's not necessarily, it's not intended to replace the O1. When you read the master plan, and my apologies, I handed this out at the meeting earlier, but if you want, this is the section in the zoning ordinance, in the master plan that describes the concept of the mixed-use district. We have our master plan, and the idea of new zoning districts came up, and it's designated on the future land use map. And one thing I think to keep in mind, too, about this idea of a mixed-use district is that it's intended to serve as a gateway introduction to the higher density central business district. So on the future land use map, the mixed use is proposed on Ford Road from the edge of the CBD to Harrison. So, those 2 blocks right there. So the Speedway on the intersection, all the way over to right before the Chase Bank. So those 2 blocks. Mixed use is also proposed further down west on Ford Road, starting at Henry Ruff, so starting where the Subway is and starting where the sports store is, going down 2 more blocks, or one more block, so that block, and then the block where and I always forget if it was a VFW or the vacant property where was it VFW or was it?
Knights of Columbus.
Knights of Columbus, thank you. I always get those 2 confused. So the Knights of Columbus site, that block as well. So both north and south side, the idea of those 2 being designated eventually as mixed use.
If I may, when we talked about that in the previous meeting, I thought we were talking about making mixed use as more of a permissive rather than a regulated situation where it would be allowed but not required.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I thought in order to do that, it might be easier to create, rather than to replace all these zoning districts with a new mixed-use district, if we made kind of an overlay map for mixed use and did it in that way and made that a permissive thing that we could do. And we could also include in there the types of uses that would be allowed to be mixed use, because some uses won't be appropriate for mixed use. And because of that, the way I see it written now, you seem to be saying that these other uses wouldn't be allowed in the mixed use district that you had described, like a hardware store or a gas station, something like that. And there are those businesses in that area.
So do you mean it would be like a C2, but possibility of a mixed use, but it would have to come in front of us? Is that what you're saying?
That's a possibility.
PD.
Or it would be allowed under, it would be a permitted use.
Like that could be a mixed use area, but it's not.
Yeah, it could be
necessarily
mixed use, but it doesn't have to be mixed use.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to know is why and maybe you don't even know because this was done a long time ago, the area at Santu's Funeral Home and the old St. Dunstan Church is designated here as a mixed use. And that doesn't seem like an appropriate.
You're right, Fred. I wasn't here back then, and I would think, the only thing I would say is that from what I've heard in terms of general talk, because I've talked to a couple previous planning commission member, and then wasn't Mr. Santu himself, but some of his colleagues, the whole idea that whole block, actually, if you notice, if you look at it, the lots on there are very large, so they've actually never been platted. They're actually the last remaining unplatted parts. They're actual parcels. They're not lots of a subdivision. They're actual parcels. So I don't know if maybe that was the reason. Why the school was included in that, I have no idea why they included that. I know the school itself has its own ideas what they want to do with their property. But then I'm not sure why that was idea.
There was a time when John wanted to build a senior
Maybe that's what.
Yeah, he had a couple of different ideas. He wanted condos at one point.
Yeah, like a senior village kind
Yeah.
of area.
Well, that would have been
with
why that
condos.
was mixed use.
But the church wouldn't sell, and it disrupted the area that he wanted to,
Yeah, because John owns a lot of property back there, but not all of it. you know.
will let you know that the church and the school are interested in doing a lot splits and combinations to split that, some of their property up into individual units. They're running into some issues just with getting their paperwork ready in terms of the
Does the
legal
school
description.
own the church?
Yes.
Okay.
And they actually own a lot of the property on the east side, is it a parking, not a park, I'm sorry. Is it a play structure? Isn't it a little parkish type thing on the east side of the street of Belton?
Yeah,
I think they got something over there.
that's just a parking lot. Belton doesn't really go through there.
No, it doesn't go through. But actually, when they had to deal with other things, because technically Belton didn't exist as a road. We're fixing that. Anyway.
aren't all religious institutions on R1 to begin with?
They are, and actually their zoning right now is R1. And that's the only other reason I was thinking maybe this quadrant, or little square, was planned as mixed use, is because the funeral home at the corner and some of that property is actually zoned right now O1.
Aren't funeral homes a C2 to begin with?
Well, actually, right here, the O1, in the O1, they are listed as a special use in the O1, funeral homes. So that's probably how Santo exists right there in the corner.
The areas up and down Ford Road that you just described, what's the advantage of having those mixed use rather than continue on in the C category that they're
Right.
already in?
Well,
C1, C2s,
Yep.
and
Well, they could still be if we did the overlay type.
I was about to back up and say, this was only one concept, the idea of creating a district, because I was going to say, if you create a district, you don't necessarily have to zone anything mixed use, because that is more, like you said, Fred, is not permissive. But the overlay district would definitely be something that could be, you could designate the areas, and it's not something that a property owner has to do, but it gives them options. And to answer your question, Mike, that's the thing I think about when it comes to these type of, the need for something like this is, as we all, I don't know how much you guys know, but retail is changing. I mean, retail is changing, and if nothing, it's been accelerated by the pandemic. And so a lot of these property owners are struggling to fill their properties. And a lot of them, that's why you see a lot of them go to service uses, their service or their restaurants. We're getting a lot more of those, very, very minimal actual old school retail going in to be able to buy something.
And
So
some of
the-
those areas, they make up by allowing apartments or something, and some of the stuff I'm
Right.
starting to see, they won't come to the city because they go, oh, that's C2, there's no way you can ever put that idea in there. Now, if you have the idea that we got this mixed use thing, you can start to mix in stuff.
so the idea of the mixed use is it's a complete overlay on all the Cs, 1, 2, and 3?
Well, not
Doesn't have
necessarily.
to
It could be just the area on the future land use map that's designated mixed use.
Yep.
Could just be that area.
Yep.
That could be the overlay.
Yeah, because the overlay district would literally be basically a drawn, hatched designation over the existing zoning designations. And that would allow the property owners, as long as you create it as an overlay, then they would just have to come in and do the appropriate review. If it's new construction, then there'd be new site plan. If it's conversion of an existing building, then technically they could do it administratively as long as they do any addition to the building.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I don't know about all this property on Middle Belt on the west side, because a lot of that is church property.
And the condos,
And the condos.
Yep.
There's a couple of office structures there, but
yeah, when us planners, when we look at the master plan and we do their future land use, we like to paint everything in very straight lines and very,
yeah,
designated, so
right. They
it's
don't take
sometimes,
into
it
account what's already there.
sometimes maybe, it looks nice though. But
Yeah.
no, the intent is to convey the concept. So even though, while yes, there are things like churches, the condos in this location, you got the gas stations in certain locations, the idea is to convey the concept of having mixed use in certain areas, so people, as they're driving towards downtown, they would see, oh, we're getting it's changed. It's gone
Yeah.
from single-family homes or just apartments to a mix. It's a little bit more dense. It's a little bit more, and then by the time you get to downtown, then it's downtown.
Well, this would include the central business district, wouldn't it? Because, that, right now, don't we have a permissive use for mixed use in the central business district?
Yes, right now, permitted by right are residential units above commercial ground floors.
Yeah, so that could be included in the overlay.
It wouldn't need to, because they would
It's
be.
already there,
They're already
but-
there. They're
yeah.
already permitted in the
Okay.
CBD. So it would be a matter of creating the overlay in certain designated areas.
So would the previous Kmart property likely fall into a mixed use?
Right now, it's in the CBD, so it's zone CBD. And so right now, they have the opportunity, if they wanted to, for example, that 1 acre lot that's in the front, if they wanted to, that could be commercial on the bottom and residents above.
With adequate parking.
Correct, yeah.
That could encourage some new construction.
Would also encourage some office spaces to be rehabilitated.
Yeah,
They've done it in several places
Well-
in Dearborn.
there's been a couple
Yeah.
of business owners on Ford Road that wanted to build an apartment above their business.
It used to be the
It puts
way.
people,
I was gonna say.
bodies on the
Businesses
street. It
operated.
puts people in the downtown, and we
Yeah,
need
that's
people
what-
in the downtown.
That's what they want.
And, with the housing being as crazy it is right now, and, young people.
Yeah, if you
don't
can provide
have-
housing like that, that would be attractive to a lot of people.
Just saying, man, we gotta open our scope a little bit.
Yeah, no,
And definitely, Fred, the overlay would be the quicker way to allow for that, because like you said, it's an option, it's permissive.
yeah, it
And
wouldn't
it's not-
displace any of the current businesses.
And it gives them the opportunity to consider it. It gives them a new tool in their tool belt as a property owner to consider a different
Another option.
alternative for that. And actually, just as a side note, like Mike was saying, we'd actually be kind of going back to how the city kind of used to be. Because we actually do have at least one building I know of on Ford Road that is a salon on the bottom, and they still have apartments above.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Used to
interesting.
be
We
a
might go
couple
back
like
to that.
There
We
used
used
to be
to-
a whole bunch.
We
Yeah.
used to have, I think Orange Jewelers' original building had an apartment above. And there was a Caldwell Funeral Home down on Ford Road that had an apartment above.
Multiple apartments.
No, just
Sure.
one.
I thought they had like 3 up there.
No, it was just one.
Okay, one big one,
Yeah, well,
because that was a pretty good sized footprint there.
it didn't cover the whole building,
Okay.
no. They actually had a roof terrace around it.
How about the store that was beside Long John Silver? Way back when it was
Oh,
Garden
yeah.
City Grain and Feed,
Yeah, and then turned into a party store.
and then turned into a party store,
Yeah,
and then turned into family.
yeah, there used to be a few of them around.
Is that what
but-
it was? Okay.
Yeah.
Back in the 60s,
Okay.
it was Garden City Grain and Feed, and then it turned into a liquor store
Mm-hmm.
in the 60s.
So just to go over what's in front of you at the moment. So what in front of you at the moment is the idea of creating a brand-new mixed-use district. It would allow for, general commercial, retail, personal service, other type of uses, and then also residential uses, live-work uses, townhouses, and that sort of thing. And then the one thing I just wanted to point out on page 9, I did create some initial development standards for those type of mixed uses, trying to get into the idea of building material and facade requirements under paragraph 1A under development standards, look at their materials, nothing, not as of a high quality as in the CBD, but something to allow for a nicer quality and some design standards, because technically, in the rest of our districts right now, we don't have specific commercial
Right.
design standards. So this would be something that could be utilized in the overlay because the development standard. So looking at, specific things like no outside storage on these sites, warehousing, shall be prohibited unless it's part of the actual parking only in the rear yard. That's a proposal. If you'd like to permit it in the side yard as well, parking, because, our sites are kind of small. And then the idea that, it's encouraging vehicular access to the rear, at the rear of the side of the site, and to minimize curb cuts on Ford Road and the thoroughfare, and then promoting pedestrian access, pathways and sidewalks. So that's just in the development standards. But yes, right now, as proposed, this is its own separate district. This could be retooled to become a mixed-use overlay district. And then it would be something where the permitted uses would be, the first permitted use would be all permitted uses within the underlying district. So if it's a C1, they get everything in C1. If it's C2, that's everything in C2. And then,
Do we necessarily want to make it all the uses? Because there might be a few of them that
oh, that's right.
don't work that well with the residents on the upper floor or in the
Right.
back.
Yeah, that could be something then that we could
I think
specify.
I think maybe we should take a look at each one individually and make sure that we think that they're suitable.
Well, then with regards into this list of permitted uses right now, do you want to just go through real quick to see if these
Yeah,
are
we can
acceptable?
do that. Well, we'd have, we've got, do we have any, we probably got some even C3s in there,
Mm-hmm, yep.
because I know there's a gas station.
Oh, there is, yeah, especially if we go, further west, east on Ford Road.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I know there's uses in C3 that we don't want to make a mixed use.
Right.
So I think if we just identify those that we feel are appropriate within those districts.
Mm-hmm. So then, for example,
Do you think we need to put that into law, or do you think somebody would actually build apartments above a gas station like?
you never know.
Oh, yeah, they would.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you never know.
I'm trying to think, would I want to live in an apartment?
Well, they say the guy that's working down at the counter can live upstairs,
Yep,
Yeah, well, that's one way to get help.
Yeah.
right.
How many venues we play?
Maybe we shouldn't restrict it. It
I don't
might
know.
work
I
for
think
some
it-
people.
I think there's some of them that we don't want as mixed use.
Right. And one way I think to look at it is, since this would be a new concept you're introducing, you can start with it slowly and start with it on those sites that would be the most easily compatible with residences. And then if for some reason it takes off, and on all the sites that are only left over are the ones that we originally thought were, not necessarily compatible with residential, then you can open up the door a little bit more.
Could always add them in later. Yeah.
But if you open them up wide right now, there's really no closing that
Yeah,
door.
right. Open the
once you do.
floodgates and then you can't go back.
Right.
No, I
So things
agree.
like, I would think the first one, offices, if officers are on the ground floor, that's something that would be
Yeah,
acceptable for
absolutely.
residents.
Medical offices or.
And then medical too, because professional offices, medical offices. Personal service establishments, that's kind of a broad terminology, but it does say, shoe repair stores, tailor shops, beauty parlors, barber shops. It does specifically list in here dry cleaning or laundry pickup. I don't know if the chemical, well, I
Dry
believe,
cleaning might be an issue.
yeah, but I thought and I have to look at our definition, I thought, in theory, the dry cleaning facilities we have now don't do the cleaning on site. They're a location where they get picked up and dropped off. But then even then, I don't know if the preponderance of
Doesn't.
not a dry
Hudson do-
cleaned clothes would be smelling as well.
I thought
remember.
Hudson Cleaners did dry cleaning on site.
They could, they could. I'm saying that the proposed use is going forward.
Well, even if,
But if we didn't want it, we can just eliminate it.
even
Yeah.
if they do it on site, they have prohibitions on their odors as well.
Well, I know, but I think that would be an iffy situation.
We can definitely just eliminate it.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be easier to go through and I think just pick out the ones that seem iffy and just scratch them out, you know?
So yeah, for personal service establishments, if we limit it to like tailor shops, beauty parlors, barber shops.
Yeah, they would be all
Yeah.
okay.
Retail stores,
Retail is probably good, yeah.
yeah, because I don't see any of those. And then one here, restaurants on the ground floor.
Okay,
Restaurants
well-
would be good as well.
Yeah, they can
Yeah.
coexist.
I mean, in the past, everything that we just named, in the past, all had
Oh,
owners living above.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
okay.
I'm trying to remember
Those are
if
some
I've seen that in the old buildings in Detroit with gas stations. I don't remember seeing it with gas stations. I can remember it with grocery stores and most
Now, we might
everything
want
else.
to restrict the type of restaurant. We wouldn't want maybe drive-through.
Says it without driving.
Yeah, right now it says standard and carry-out restaurants without drive-through facilities.
Yeah,
Yep. And that's really the only other type of commercial retail, commercial building, or uses that were proposed in the mixed-use district. Then we get into the residential uses. So it is kind of a.
okay, but what we have to do, we have to look at, since it's an overlay, we have to look at
Right, the C1.
residential, C1, C2, and C3.
Mhm.
To see if any of their uses are not appropriate.
Yep, so what I can do is I can combine, I can condense all the C1, C2, and C3 uses terminology in here, and then combine them into one, and then you either could just list them all right now, and then you can go through and strike it out then, or I could strike them out, or... I'll bring them all to you, so that way you can
Yeah.
review them in that way.
Okay. I mean, we could,
I'd like to see that and then see what just the initial throwdown would be with the overlay and actually drive it and look. You know, because if you sit across the street from this and try and envision what if on
Yeah.
these different buildings, I think that would give you a good feel whether or not the fit is right.
yeah.
I mean, just sitting here, we're thinking, oh yeah, there's a gas station right there. Oh yeah, there's this, there's that. But it's different if you park in front of that block and look and go, okay, we have a veterinarian center, that would be a great place. We have the Foxhole, which has a heating and cooling supplier on the first floor. And it did have video equipment and stuff in the front of the store. That's already got 4 or 5 units above it. And so I would like to just look at it in perspective physically before making a decision.
Well,
So
yeah, we don't have
if
to.
we just tentative, I think we're good on
I think
all.
if we just agree on the general premise of how we want to do it, and then we can fine tune it a little bit later.
The areas you just spelled out, and then continuing on beyond Brandt or Subway, that section possibly to go hand in hand with the section on the south side of the street. Those areas, I think, would be a good place to look at initially. And then possibly add, well, let's see, the CBD goes all the way to Maplewood or no?
Some places are
Yeah.
gonna knock themselves out. Parking.
No.
It doesn't, the zoning doesn't go that far, but the planned,
Future land use
Future
goes
land
that
use
far,
does.
yeah. But,
but the CBD stops at Block and
Okay,
Elmwood, no, Dawson.
so we already have the equivalent of mixed use, because the sports venue next to it has a karate studio. And I don't know if it's, I think it's storage, but that already has residential above it currently. So would we want to, as a potential, go all the way to Warren on the east and west side of the street, up beyond Block?
Right. No, I mean, that's a possibility. Two things, though, to keep in mind. One big one, and one other option, is the parking requirements.
It's gonna knock a lot of places out.
So
Right.
the ability to have the apartments would be based on if they can have enough of that space to put in parking for the residents as well.
Well, the reason I,
Thing about a lot of those buildings, they have parking in front too.
Right.
And your description had parking in the rear
Only.
only.
Right. Yeah, so that was, we'd have to change that and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
but see, the reason I'd like to look at the other areas is not as they exist now, but if I'm not mistaken, because we go downtown frequently, and the easiest way to do that is Ford Road to 94, boom, and then take the lodge down or whatever you can do. If I'm not mistaken, there's 3 places that have recently undergone a change with adding residential or office up on the 2nd floor. And at least one of them, and I'm trying to remember the cross street, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of Outer Drive. They took a smaller existing building and basically gutted it down to like 3 walls, expanded the footprint, and then built a 2nd story. They almost totally demolished the existing smaller building that was there. So there might be applications. I mean, what if the guy that has no parking, like right across the street here next to the pet store with the auto service center, what if he saw a future in building a new garage, changing the footprint,
Right.
and putting a couple of units above there? So it could encourage that type of thought process if we don't pre-think it by parking.
I think maybe what we should do is kind of limit the scope right now and see how it works, rather than throw it out there everywhere because it sounds like a good idea. If we just go with these 3 areas, east and west on Ford Road and south on Middle Belt from downtown, if we stick with those initially, maybe we can fine tune it a little bit and get it the way we want.
Sure, we can always add.
It's always
Yep.
better to go that way than.
Yeah, we can always increase the size of the overlay.
And then one other just issue for you to consider is because normally in these type of situations, in a CBD where they allow for mixed use, they, especially in a CBD, downtown, they have the idea of no residential on the ground floor. And
Yeah.
the reason for that is so that they can promote activity by retail and by residential and foot traffic on the ground floor. So remember, the mixed-use idea is supposed to be the introduction into the downtown. So some communities do allow residences, the first floor to be utilized for residential. And usually the way that's done is by allowing townhomes. So not necessarily, stacked apartments or an apartment building, but the idea of allowing townhomes, so like the front door is on that ground floor. And the other reason for that too is, like, in theory, then even if it was a little residential space, living space, or none, or a little residential space, if it was a townhome, it could be a 3-story townhome. The parking could be on the first floor and the living above. But you do need a little bit of living space for the people to get out of the car, have their little, mud room or whatever you will, and then to get up to the second floor and third floor.
Dearborn's done that
Yeah, so a lot of places have
quite
done that.
extensively.
And they usually do have it on the outskirts of the downtown. I can think of multiple places in Ann Arbor where that's allowed. And yeah, all over, there's a lot of the places where townhomes are an option. So it's not necessarily, I'm promoting, just the idea for an option for you to consider if you wanted to do that, or not. Once again, like Fred, you said, let's start out with something and then see about opening it up. But right now, in this draft thing, it's the concepts of townhomes.
Something to consider too, his letter from the mayor, he talked about a walkable city. And by including this, we encourage that, all within our existing retail districts of C1, 2, 3, we encourage that walkable if we encourage residential.
Right.
Because in his most recent newsletter, he's talked about a walkable city, i.e. sidewalks throughout the city where there are no sidewalks, and making it an ordinance now where this will definitely happen when this property gets sold, or. So if we did the same thing in our C1, C2, and C3, we would encourage that more. And if you couple that with a very old study, the Plant Moran study that talked about a walkable city and putting the front doors onto the main streets and not the front doors behind the buildings, what we would call behind the buildings, and then couple that with encouraging that residential inflow, it would only seek to aid in that. In conjunction with that same study about a walkable city, they were referring to the downtown area specifically. They talked about the build out of the city should be tall in the center and taper down
Right.
as it leaves the core of the CBD.
Yeah.
So they were encouraging, which we did that encouragement with McDonald's
Right.
by having more or less a mock second story to do that. So all these things could kind of tie in together.
So I will revise this amendment to create the overlay, give you a complete list of the uses allowed in the C1, C2, and C3, so that way you can go through,
Kind of pick and choose
pick
what
and
we
choose what
would
you
be
think is appropriate,
in
and then
Yeah.
you leave the development standards in there, if that sounds okay.
that. Okay.
Okay. So if we want to move on, the third issue before you is something with regards, something I think is necessary because of some recent experience with cigar lounges in the city. I've had more experience dealing with them. We did just recently create the hookah lounge or club definition, and we were utilizing that to just regulate these uses because there's been some interest in hookah lounges being established in the city. But having gone through a recent experience and getting familiar with the state licensing, I think it was important to revisit this issue and be more specific with regards to what is and isn't a hookah club and versus a cigar lounge, and then also to address the issue of smoke shops as well, because currently our definition of smoke shops is only addresses tobacco specifically, and it doesn't address the other items that are related to that, which is shisha or hookah, and then also vape type products. And so when it comes to this ordinance in front of you, the first proposal is to create a new cigar lounge definition specifically and reference specifically it's not a license, but what happens is the state has a state statute which prohibits smoking indoors, but they do allow exemptions. What they do is they issue as an exemption for an entity to do two things. The first is to have a cigar lounge. So it's specifically called a cigar lounge exemption, where they're allowed to have for sale cigars and to smoke the cigars indoor. And that's the only thing permitted with the cigar lounge exemption. So that's why in this definition, it specifically lists that exemption specifically. The other exemption from the state law for smoking is as a higher level exemption called tobacco, and I didn't create the terminology, the legislature or somebody else did, but it's called the Tobacco Specialty Retail Store Exemption. Now, even though it's called a retail store exemption, the intent is to allow for individuals to smoke tobacco. It does allow them to smoke hookah pipes and hookah in an establishment, if they have that exemption. So I believe by putting these specific, calling out which exemption fits what definition, they would either be one or the other with that definition. Because to let you know, the cigar lounge that has been permitted in the city, it is owned C3. The property owner at the time said they were going to primarily do cigar lounge smoking. And so that's why it was permitted in the city, in that use. Then during the course of inspections, we did see that hookah pipes were in there. I contacted the state to see the type of exemption that the applicant had, and the applicant actually went and got the tobacco retail store exemption, not just the cigar lounge exemption. So in the state's eyes, they're allowed to do any type of smoking of cigars, cigarettes, hookah in that establishment. Because the city approval was only for cigar lounge, it's one of these things again where he is allowed, it is defined as a cigar lounge. The footprint and the use is supposed to be 50% cigar, and then less than that as they can have hookah pipes in there. Because that's allowed by state license, and in theory, their predominant use as a cigar lounge. So that's why that's permitted, and I just felt that in order to make every applicant aware of, right, these are our standards, that these are the two types and where they go. So that's why this definitions are in there, just to clarify some things. Because I removed the lounge reference from other types of other ordinances and other sections of the ordinance, just so someone doesn't think they're a hookah lounge or this kind of lounge or that sort of thing. Because applicants have said, well, I'm a lounge, so therefore, and it's in your ordinance, and I can go in the CBD, in the central business district. And we're like, well, no, that's not the intent. So it's trying to clarify this to specifically say, you either are a cigar lounge, you have your cigar lounge exemption, but if you get this other exemption, you're defined as a hookah club, and the other aspects of a hookah club are then regulated. So those are the definition changes. And then below that, the definition change for the smoke shop would specifically list inhalants as another type of regulated product that is part of a smoke shop, because we have had some applicants saying they're only selling vape or they're only selling hookah, they're not selling tobacco, so therefore they don't qualify as a smoke shop.
What is shisha?
Shisha is another version, is the type of tobacco that goes in a hookah pipe.
It is tobacco though?
Well, when you ask someone, they'll say, oh no, this is a type of shisha that doesn't have tobacco in it. But yeah, the vast majority of shisha does have tobacco in it. And rather than going into all of these shops and making sure that every product is a non-tobacco product, I've now, because the zoning ordinance does allow the zoning administrator to interpret the ordinance, shisha and hookah under the state of Michigan is regulated the same as tobacco. So that's why you need the tobacco exemption. So that's why with our interpretation, if you're trying to sell hookah, it falls under right now we interpret it as falling under a smoke shop definition. And inhalants and vape, technically they are not regulated at this point in time by the state of Michigan. However, the federal government does regulate vape products as an inhalant, as something very similar to, something you inhale as like tobacco and nicotine, because it's a conveyance of the nicotine. It's just a different way of conveying the nicotine to a person because they just want to, which is fine. It's just that we're just, rather than just interpreting it that way, I'd like to put it in black and white in the ordinance, because I feel, because once again, it's not that it won't be sold, it can be sold. It's just that it would be, if the predominant use of the business is selling these products, then there's considered a smoke shop. They're allowed in the city, but they have to be in C3. So that's it. So that's why I'd
Are
like to,
there age restrictions on selling?
yes, I'm not sure what they are. I can't remember if it's 21 or 18. I believe it's 18 for vape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
think so.
For vape products, it's
I think
18,
so.
but for shisha and tobacco, it's 21,
Oh, okay.
right? Is that right?
No, tobacco's 18.
Oh, okay, sorry. 18. It's 18 for both those
I
products.
don't know that much.
Is that regulated in our ordinance, or is that just state?
That's just state.
Okay.
So we allow them. So if they decide to change the age, one up or down, then we'll just comply with the state standard.
Right.
And then finally, at the bottom, we create a new section, 168, that has specific standards for hookah clubs, regulating their hours of operation. And, you know, I just picked the time. I put, do not operate past 10 PM. I will say in other municipalities adjacent to us, some of the hookah clubs, they're clubs, they have loud music, and they operate late hours. And right now, this is just, 10 PM, whatever you guys would like to see in the hours of operation,
You
but
think
given the
10 PM
amount,
is gonna fly?
I just thought that because, given the proximity of C3 zoning and to adjacent residents,
Yeah.
it seemed like 10 o'clock was a good idea, but I don't know if you want to go 11, 12, 9, whatever.
Drive down Ford Road at 1 o'clock in the morning on the weekend.
Yeah,
10 o'clock. Mm-mm.
right,
Places are lit up like Christmas trees.
right.
And it,
Well, we've got bars that are pretty
Sure.
close proximity to residences too.
True,
maybe the hours should parity the bars because
yep.
it's a similar type activity.
Mhm.
Now, with it being a club though, isn't that a private establishment, or are we still using club?
I was, in my thinking, I was thinking of club colloquially as a dance club type of operation where there's more music and everything, not necessarily a private club like the Moose or anything.
Okay.
So I don't know if you think we should define that better in the hookah club definition. But,
Can we agree to move that time to
whatever you guys want.
similar hours of,
No, I think if we can get away with an earlier hour, I think it'd be
yeah, but
fine.
it's,
I don't think it'll fly, but,
it's,
I mean, maybe we should, maybe 10's a little bit low, maybe we should say midnight, I don't know.
to me, I think the same hours as bars. For the people that are operating that type of thing, I've been in them a couple of
Is
times.
that gonna be hard
here
to
in New
regulate
York.
if we have an early hour shutdown? Is that gonna create a problem for the police or something, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I would think that, well, what it would be is the applicants would have to just list on their CFO the hours they intend to operate, and I would just have to make sure that they comply with the ordinance at the time you choose. I would say that you probably want to put some hours and some time, and might not necessarily want to say exactly like liquor establishments, simply because I believe there have been some discussions about changing the bars to 4 a.m.
Oh, yeah,
The what?
4 a.m.
4 o'clock.
4 a.m.
Chicago does it.
That's what they are in New York.
in Chicago too, yeah.
Yeah.
New York.
So you might want to not say similar to bars, you might want
No, I
to pick
don't think we should make that reference, but we could use that time if we wanted.
so,
Can we use 2 o'clock here? Because it's a similar type use. There's entertainment in there and the hookah. And I've been in them in New York and Detroit, and it's like being in a bar. I mean, they do have stuff to eat and drink, but not necessarily alcohol. But they do have some food items and snack items and stuff. To me, it seemed like I was in a bar, except,
Well, I'm sure the atmosphere is similar,
yeah,
you know,
They usually have live music
So-
and stuff too, so.
yeah.
same type of people that are gonna enjoy one would enjoy the other. I don't wanna restrict a proprietor's ability to operate like that. I think 2 o'clock would be good.
What does everybody else think about the time?
Seems consistent.
I think that if it's gonna help somebody's business, that's my feeling. I
Yeah,
kinda would like to see
Go
everyone
for-
prosper.
go for 2 o'clock then?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. And then other standards right here are intended to try and make sure they're as compatible as they can be with adjacent properties. So they can obviously have, just their noise and sound systems just have to be, none of the noise is discernible at the property line, is how it's listed.
Okay,
And then air quality control for the hookah clubs. That's generally, it's actually a standard, if it's by the state of Michigan, they have a very, very, very effective and high-quality standard. One of the reasons that the current cigar lounge took a little time is because they had to meet the state of Michigan standards, which were our mechanical inspector never saw that kind of standard before. So it was pretty high quality.
But they used to have prior to the full smoking ban, they put those smoke eaters in there,
Yep.
giant smoke eaters. I guess if you put enough of those in there, you can pretty much minimize that.
And so I just wanted, working with the fire marshal, wanted to reference
yeah,
fire safety compliance.
good idea.
And then, because some of the operations, he had to, educate all of us on in terms of what the requirements
Well,
for
even,
the.
yeah, even if there's no alcohol, they have to watch the capacity in the room and.
But also the activity too that go on, because apparently some of these hookah pipes and that sort of thing, they have not open flame, but they light coals.
It's like charcoal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it works, and it can be done safely. So we just have to make sure they do it that way.
Yeah.
Yep. And then just, that everything has to be inside, really. So I can make that change to the hours of operation, and if there's anything else you see in here that needs to be revised.
No, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think you probably are more aware of what it takes to make us compatible with state regulations. So,
And then the final one before you tonight in this batch is with regards to therapeutic massage. Basically what it is that there is also a state statute that regulates therapeutic massage, but it requires a license for only certain types of massage therapy that it calls therapeutic, and other types don't even need the individual to have a license. They can perform, for example, something you call Reiki massage. That doesn't need to be done by a licensed individual. So the intent of this would be to make sure that anything that is done, anything that meets the definition of a therapeutic massage, which is, provided physical therapy or therapy, so that whether it's done by a doctor, whether it's done under doctor supervision, or done by a licensed professional, those are the type of therapeutic massages that would be permitted as a personal service or within a doctor's office, or that sort of thing. And our ordinance generally includes that. But
doesn't our ordinance require the operators to be licensed?
yes, and so it does, but then I wanted to clean up the definition because to make sure that therapeutic massage was done by a licensed individual or done by a doctor under a doctor's orders. But then separate massage services are clearly defined and clearly created as a regulated use. So massage services that don't, that are done other than on the head and scalp, because that's the other time that, technically people are offering massage in a beauty parlor. They provide head, scalp massages and face and neck and shoulder massages. That's usually the defining line where those individuals, they don't have to be licensed because the state statute doesn't require those individuals that do licensing where the client is fully clothed and they're just providing massages to the scalp, face, neck, and shoulders. Those individuals don't have to have a license, so it's just a service. It's a massage service. So then any of the other unlicensed massage services would be classified as a regulated use. And within the city, a regulated use is a special use only permitted in the C3, and the only way they would be allowed to open is coming before us, getting a special land use approval, and then operating as a regulated use in the C3. So what this does is looking at the definition to try and say that massage parlors or massage establishments, that's where the unlicensed massage services are offered. And then therapeutic massage, defining that specifically, and therapeutic massage facilities, defining that specifically as done by a doctor, under a doctor's order, or done under a licensed individual. And then revising, we do have existing standards, but just revising those a little more to once again separate therapeutic massage done by those individuals and that they are allowed to be done in a personal service establishment, in a doctor's office. And then also stating in paragraph D here that a licensed massage therapist may operate a home occupation. So allowing, because that tends to happen as well. An individual doing everything in accordance with the state would in theory be allowed to have it as a home occupation. So that's just, something that's a draft that can be changed. And then specifically calling out that if massage is administered to the scalp, neck, face, or shoulders, they shall be permitted within beauty salons and barbershops. I don't know what else they're called. And then specifically saying that any unlicensed or underregistered individual not operating, so they can have to do it within a massage parlor, and then that those are subject to the regulated use provisions. The idea is so that way the massage, for example, there's, the most common brand is the Massage Envy places. Like, they're licensed by the state, they're a personal service, and they have licensed individuals. Excuse me, the facility isn't, but the individuals are licensed. So then they would be a permitted use as a personal service, and they could be located in places. But any place that's trying to offer services that without a license, it's a regulated use.
Okay. Well, I don't suppose we can completely eliminate that.
That's a good question. I don't think so, only because the state law specifically says that massage services, certain types of massage services don't require a license. And therefore, I guess that gives them validity to those other types of massages, like a Reiki massage and those other massages. And I can check with the attorney to see if it's something we can just eliminate altogether and say the only massage service allowed is licensed massage.
Well, I'm thinking in any massage parlor that we have, don't we require all the operators to be licensed? So that type of activity wouldn't be allowed in that
Correct.
massage parlor.
Correct.
So it would have to be in something other than a massage parlor.
Right.
Other than a hair salon where they might rub your scalp or your neck, I can't see where you would find that.
Well, I think that the issue is that we list massage parlors right now as a regulated use, similar to all the other adult uses. And so the idea that, in theory, if we are required to allow them in the city, there aren't any now.
If they weren't in a massage parlor, they could go someplace and do it in a non-regulated use.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess that's, okay.
I was just trying to, once again, be a little bit more clear as to what is and isn't allowed so that we can regulate them, because I don't know if you noticed, but the one massage parlor that we did have on Ford Road, not the one, but one of the ones on just east of the Chase Bank, That one is no longer in operation because they were found in violation. They had a violation there. So the CFO was pulled, and they were told that the only way you can begin operations again is as a licensed facility. And then we haven't had any, they haven't made any application, and right now the unit is available for lease, so.
How about the one on Merriman?
Merriman. That one, I did the research.
Their services considerably from
Oh,
when
yeah.
they opened.
Well, there's several issues with them. One, the windows are completely covered, which isn't meet the ordinance. The ordinance officers advised them of that. And then I do believe that, yeah, I think that is the one facility in which the license has expired, because you can check every license in the, on the websites for the state. That license has expired, so we're in communication with them to get them to provide us with a revised license. The other two facilities in the city have licensed individuals. The one on Ford Road in the plaza with the Domino's, and the one on the east side of town on Ford Road. Those right now currently have licensed individuals in them. So.
Who's the one on Ford Road?
Next to the Papa John's, the other pizza place.
Isn't it in the back of Sheridan Square?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that one. Is there one over there?
I'm not positive. I thought there was one in the back there.
I don't know, but I can check. But this was also brought up because of our recent experiences with trying to do enforcement, and it worked, but I'd like to just clarify
Tighten
it.
up a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see a problem. Anybody have any questions about that?
No.
No, I think that's probably good.
So it looks like the
You want
main,
to just keep these all together, and
if you're,
we'll wait until you come back with the overlay for mixed use?
if that sounds good,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, next item is November meeting, discussion of potential rescheduling due to Veterans Day. Are we right on?
Brian?
Yeah, Fred, that's just, so when we, our normal schedule is the second Tuesday of every month. This November, it does fall on Veterans Day. So the city offices will be closed that day. So the building will be closed. I have a key. We could have the meeting, but I don't know in terms of communications department, broadcasting. I did talk to Mario, and he said he could do the first Thursday in November, if that would work
That would be
for,
better than the 3rd?
Unfortunately, I have a conflict on the 3rd.
Okay.
so I thought I'd bring that up to you today, just in case, if that's,
Is everybody okay with changing it to the first Thursday?
Sure.
all right, because that will give us enough time to do, notify the public of the schedule, and,
I'm supposed to go on a trip
Oh, yeah.
to Texas for my sister's birthday the first week in November.
Well, who's more important,
You want to ask me or my sister?
Well, maybe we can get some more people to come to the meeting.
Right. I will know better once I can get home and look at that calendar, because I'm
Yeah,
trying to
okay, well,
remember.
let's-
My birthday's the 30th of October, but I thought that it was going to be around the 3rd.
Yeah,
Coincides with something that's going, it's a kind of a big deal. We're going to fly out of
Well,
town.
sure.
We're going to Houston, so it's not like I'm going to be down the street.
yeah, right, no. No, we can
Well, we have two other members.
maybe twist somebody else's arm into coming to the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's make it for the first, then,
all right.
first Thursday.
If I'm
Okay, next item, commissioners' comments regarding planning and zoning matters. Eric? Nothing? Mike?
What's the latest on the furniture store in the CVS on Ford Road in Brant? And what's the latest on our new
LA Fitness.
gym and workout center?
With regards to the furniture store going in, I guess it's just slow going for them.
There's been some activity.
There've been some activity there. They were proposing, I thought, were slight minor modifications to the floor area, just because it's gonna be a furniture store, so it's gonna be a showroom, and not a lot of walls. But apparently it's taking some time.
Are they taking out the spandrel windows?
They're not taking the windows
One
on.
broken now,
There's
so-
two of them broken.
Oh,
Is
is
it
it?
two now? Okay.
They've been putting in windows.
They put, the ones on Ford Road, they would be putting in windows. I don't believe the ones on Brant they'd be putting in. I thought they were gonna
Well,
leave
they
those.
put some on the west side of the building. They put new windows in there.
Okay,
On the west, yes, on the west side of the parking lot.
so they
Yeah.
are replacing the spandrel.
Yeah, those they're replacing, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see today if they had changed them. So yeah,
Saw
they're
electricians there the other day.
they're slow going. A lot of our sites, I think, and it might be due to the labor shortage or material costs, but they starts and stops with the projects.
Jobs are waiting for people.
Yeah. And then with regards to LA Fitness, they've provided communication on two fronts. One, they have issues with the existing storm drain. They want the city to petition Wayne County to clean out the drain, so that way their proposed stormwater detention can adequately drain accordingly. It's not anything, it's not something.
Bullshit. How do they know it's not draining?
Right, exactly. But that's one of the issues raised, I guess I'll just say, as a point of concern. And then the other is they've consistently cited the market as the reason for the need to slow down.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
think
their
that-
biggest reason.
Yeah, I think they're just very cautious in their approach.
Yeah.
I would have thought they would have liked to have begun construction during the pandemic, so that when all the restrictions were lifted, they could open the doors right away, but it's their business, so they can.
I would have thought
Jim's
they
got
would
that
have
fine.
taken that massive amount of concrete floor out by now.
Right.
To have that done, but
Yep.
if they end up slapping a for sale sign on that property, then I would like to look at a complete rezoning. Because we had talked about condos in that area at one time. And with the walkable city and with the change in mixed use and with the mayor sidewalks,
Well, there is a plan for putting roads through that whole parking lot.
Yep.
And different businesses, different types of businesses.
it'd be all the things we
Yeah,
would want to look at.
yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that could be done with it, but
And if that would be enough of an incentive to encourage them to either poop or get off the pot, I'd like to see it conveyed to them. Because ideally, I'd like to join somewhere before 2030, you know,
Yes.
so.
well, you can go to Livonia.
Do we have any more information on the Dunkin' Donuts that,
No, nothing other than, a long time ago, he said that he put all his money into his other stores and
you
he
see
just
what
hasn't.
happens when a business is anxious to open with Checkers? Because they had that whipped into shape in no time at all, and the places, it's forever got a line of cars,
Yes.
so. And are there any other sites that people have been inquiring about? I mean, Ford Road and Merriman.
Oh, the northwest
seem to
corner?
lend itself to a lot of different things, especially since you have a snazzy new clinic next door. That property is looking real good.
I've only actually ever had one inquiry into that property, believe it or not, just one for them, but there are some, the owner of the vacant VFW, so next to the diner, right? Is that right? On the other side of Ford Road? That owner is actively marketing the site, trying to find someone to go in there. The fact that you had previously approved a drive-through there, you know, I let people know that. Like, they obviously would have to come.
Burger operation.
Right. They obviously would have to come back and get all their approvals because everything is expired. But, you know, in theory, that could work because the rear piece of that site is only zoned parking. So they couldn't put any kind of square footage in the back. But several people have been inquiring about
It's awful
new
deep.
construction. It is.
Not very wide, but it's awful deep. And I just wonder if that unknown burger that we approved on the VFW didn't ultimately move to Ford Road in Merriman, and it's called Checkers. You know, because we never did find out, you know, what the company was.
They didn't have a company, they were just trying to sell it. They got approval on spec.
Yeah, that's probably the
Yeah.
most likely scenario there. But it's surprising. The last we heard was the owner wanted an exorbitant amount for Ford Road in Merriman. And apparently that hasn't changed much. Of course, nobody's gonna move too quick right now, but just surprising with the boom that we had prior to going into COVID, that there wasn't activity there.
Eric?
Any new inquiries anywhere?
Nothing?
Nope, nothing else.
How about you, Frank?
Nothing, no, thank you.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything either. It's getting late. I would like to welcome you to the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Oh, Fred. Just before we
Brian.
adjourn, just because we formally approve the meeting calendar too, if we could just entertain a quick motion to officially change the meeting date
Okay.
from November 11th to November 4th.
Would somebody make a motion?
Motion to change the date?
Second.
Okay. Yeah.
Take the roll.
Commissioner Turnbull,
Aye.
Commissioner King,
Aye.
Commissioner Walls,
Aye.
Commissioner Steenberg,
Hey,
Chairperson May.
Aye. Okay.
he's crossing
Did you
T's
have-
and dotting i's over there.
Yes, he is. Do you have anything else, Mario?
Nope, nothing at this time. I would just make sure to get those revisions to you. Trying to think. People have made inquiries into the agenda, but I won't, until I receive an application, I won't tell you what's coming up, because a lot of people ask, and then they never get the applications.
Yeah. I'm
Does
sure.
the $2,000 make them think twice, or whatever the fee is now?
No, not usually.
Good.
Okay, have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Motion carried.
ayes have it, so ordered.